A student asked the master, "What is the meaning of life?" The master said nothing. He wasn't being rude, he was giving the only honest answer. This exchange, or something close to it, appears in dozens of variations across the Zen tradition. A student brings a question, fully expecting words. The master offers silence, or a shout, or a gesture that seems to have nothing to do with the question at all. One master held up a single finger. Another removed his sandal and placed it on his head. One simply said mu, a word that means something like no or nothing or the question is wrong. For centuries, Western readers have treated these encounters as charming but cryptic, Eastern mystics being mysterious. But what if they are not mysterious at all? What if the silence is the most precise thing ever said? In the Rinzai school of Zen Buddhism, students are given koans, questions or statements that cannot be answered by logic. The most famous is probably this one: what is the sound of one hand clapping? That sounds like a riddle. It is not. A riddle has an answer you can figure out if you think hard enough. A koan has no answer that the thinking mind can reach, and that is the entire point. The purpose of a koan is to exhaust the rational mind, to push thought to its absolute limit and then past it. The student sits with the koan, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for years, turning it over, trying every logical approach, every clever interpretation, every philosophical framework, and none of them work. The koan just sits there, impervious to analysis, like a locked door without a keyhole. And then if the practice works, something else happens. The student stops trying to solve the koan and starts experiencing it. The gap between the question and the answer closes, not because the answer has been found, but because the need for an answer has dissolved. The student realizes that the question was never about information. It was about transformation. The koan was not a puzzle to be solved. It was a mirror to be looked into until you stopped seeing your own reflection and started seeing through it. The Zen tradition is filled with masters whose most powerful teaching was not speaking. Joshu, one of the most celebrated Chinese Zen masters of the 9th century, was asked by a monk, "Does a dog have Buddha nature?" The orthodox Buddhist answer is yes. All sentient beings have Buddha nature. But Joshu said, mu, not yes, not no, a word that negates the framework of the question itself. That single syllable has been assigned to Zen students as a koan for over 1,000 years. Vimalakirti, a figure from the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, was asked to explain the nature of non-duality, the teaching that subject and object, self and other, are not truly separate. The other teachers in the room offered eloquent explanations. When it came to Vimalakirti, he said nothing. His silence, the text tells us, was like thunder. It was the most complete explanation anyone had given, precisely because it did not reduce the truth to words. And there is the famous story of the Buddha himself holding up a flower before an assembly of monks. Only one monk, Mahakasyapa, smiled. He understood. What did he understand? The tradition says he received a direct transmission outside of words. Not a secret teaching, not a hidden meaning, something that could only be communicated in the space where language stops. Why would silence be a better answer than words? Because words by their nature divide. The moment you say the meaning of life is X, you have separated X from everything that is not X. You have drawn a boundary. You have created the illusion that truth can be contained in a formula, that reality can be captured by a sentence the way a butterfly can be pinned to a board. The butterfly is still there, but it is no longer alive. Zen distrusts this process deeply. Not because language is useless. Zen masters wrote volumes of poetry and commentary, but because language about the deepest things tends to replace experience with description. You read a book about the taste of an orange and feel, on some level, that you have learned something, but you have not tasted the orange. Silence does not describe. It points. It creates a space where the mind, exhausted from its compulsive narrating, categorizing, labeling, can finally rest, not in unconsciousness, in awareness. pure awareness, before the mind has carved it up into concepts. This is what Shunryu Suzuki, the Japanese monk who brought Soto Zen to America, called beginner's mind, the mind before it has already decided what everything means, the mind that is open enough to encounter reality directly without the filter of what it already knows. The master's silence is an invitation into that openness. It says, stop looking for the answer. Start looking at the question. Start looking at the one who is asking. The obvious objection is Zen not simply anti-intellectual? The answer is silence, not a convenient way to avoid having to think carefully. Could this not be used to justify lazy thinking, vagueness, or the refusal to engage with difficult questions? It could, and it has been. Western pop Zen, the kind that shows up on Instagram over pictures of waterfalls, often reduces the tradition to stop thinking and just be, as if centuries of rigorous practice can be distilled into a bumper sticker. That is not Zen. That is its opposite. Authentic Zen practice is one of the most intellectually demanding disciplines on earth. Monks sit for hours, days, weeks with a single koan. The master rejects their answers dozens of times, hundreds of times, until the student has exhausted every clever thought they have. The silence at the end of that process is not the silence of someone who never thought. It is the silence of someone who has thought so completely that they have arrived at the other side of thinking. There is a difference between the person who is quiet because they have nothing to say, and the person who is quiet because what they have understood cannot be compressed into speech. The Zen master's silence is the second kind. It is not the absence of knowledge. It is knowledge so total that language has become too small to carry it. We live in a civilization that is terrified of silence. Our phones fill every gap. Our podcasts narrate every commute. Our feeds ensure that no moment passes without input, without opinion, without noise. Silence has become something we endure rather than something we choose. But the Zen masters knew something that we are only beginning to rediscover. There are things that can only be heard in the quiet, not mystical things, simple things. The quality of your own attention, the texture of the present moment, the vast, unnarrated space between one thought and the next. You do not need a master or a monastery for this. You need only what Joshu offered his student, the willingness to sit with the question instead of reaching for the answer. To let the silence be, for once, enough. The examined life does not always require more words. Sometimes it requires fewer. Sometimes the deepest examination is the one that happens when you stop explaining and start listening, not to another voice, but to the silence that has been there all along, underneath everything, waiting for you to notice. The master says nothing, and in that nothing, everything is said.